Imagine the scene: a billionaire king shielded by untouchable privilege, exempt from paying taxes, and lounging in inherited wealth that was seized through centuries of force, exploitation, and oppression, rolls up in a gleaming luxury car. His destination? A food bank, the very symbol of society's failure to care for its most vulnerable. The photo ops follow, cameras capturing his hollow gestures of sympathy as he greets the desperate and destitute. But behind the polished facade, the image is grotesque, a stark reminder of the obscene inequality that defines our world today. The parasites of royal privilege. This so-called king and his twisted inbred family sit atop centuries of stolen wealth, hoarding resources while doing nothing to contribute to society. They leech off the labour and taxes of ordinary people, all while avoiding accountability and paying nothing themselves. King Charles in particular represents the worst of this system, a man whose privilege is built on exploitation, whose scandals are whispered about in shadows but never addressed. Let's not mince words. This is a family with a legacy of corruption, greed, and, yes, accusations of deeply disturbing behaviour. For decades, whispers have circulated about the royal family's connections to shady elites and their disturbing involvement in cover-ups. Allegations surrounding Prince Andrew and his ties to Jeffrey Epstein are only the tip of the iceberg. King Charles himself is rumoured to have used his position to shield allies from justice, ensuring that the public never sees the full extent of their crimes. This is not merely about incompetence, it's about systemic abuse of power. Charles, the epitome of unearned entitlement, is shielded from scrutiny despite allegations that would ruin anyone else. His very existence is a reminder of the hypocrisy of a system that protects the powerful at all costs, even as the powerless starve. His inbred dynasty, steeped in scandal and disgrace, continues to perpetuate inequality while pretending to serve. Meanwhile, at the food bank, a grim reality for millions, exists as a lifeline for those crushed under the weight of systemic neglect. The people who queue here are not faceless statistics. They are parents forced to skip meals so their children can eat, workers juggling multiple jobs that still fail to pay a living wage, and pensioners whose pensions barely cover the cost of survival. They represent the real struggle of ordinary people battling a system designed to keep them down. To these families, the king's visit isn't an act of charity, it's an insult. It's a hollow performance, a grotesque spectacle of privilege parading in front of those who have nothing. It's a photo op for a man who will never understand their suffering, let alone do anything meaningful to alleviate it. This is not benevolence, it's exploitation. The stark contrast between the king's wealth and the struggles of those he pretends to help is not just offensive, it's a symptom of a much deeper problem. This is not a story of charity or goodwill. It is a story of exploitation, a calculated move to appear compassionate while the systemic injustices that create food banks remain firmly in place. When the cameras leave, the food bank lines will remain. The families will continue to struggle, their stories reduced to props in a billionaire's PR campaign. Meanwhile, the king will retreat to his palace, untouched and unchanged by the suffering he has witnessed. Welcome to Absurdistan. This is the grotesque reality of modern inequality. A world where the rich grow ever richer by extracting wealth from the poor, and the powerless are expected to applaud their oppressors. A world where a king's limo at a food bank is not an outrage, but just another day in Absurdistan. The royal family is nothing more than a parasitic institution, clinging to relevance while perpetuating the very inequality they claim to care about. They've shielded themselves from accountability for centuries, covering up scandals, exploiting the working class, and turning a blind eye to the suffering of those they claim to represent. Their existence is a slap in the face to everyone who struggles to survive in a rigged system. It's time to stop glorifying empty gestures from the wealthy and powerful. Real change won't come from their charity. It will come from dismantling the systems that allow such inequality to persist. Until then, the spectacle will continue, and so will the suffering.